Hello everyone and welcome back to the Worm Whisperer channel, or welcome to the Worm Whisperer channel if you're a new member here. I hope that you'll sub and subscribe if you like this video. Today we're going to go over how to keep your worm bin from getting too heavy or being too light at harvest time. So I'm getting a lot of questions on my channel. People are asking, well, how heavy is the worm bins when you are done harvesting them, or when you're ready to harvest them? They say, how heavy is the worm bin? And I can understand why they're asking those questions, is because they probably, they want a worm farm, but if they may have like back issues or chronic pain or anything like that, they want to know how heavy the worm bin is going to be, but they still want a worm farm. So I completely understand how that can make sense and how people want to know that. So I'm going to teach you today how to either keep your bin as light as you need it to be or as full of worm castings as you want it to be. So if you can handle a heavy worm bin at harvest, I'll teach you how to make sure that it's as full as it possibly can be. And I'll show you how to keep it lighter if you need to keep it as light as possible so you're able to harvest it at harvest time. So I hope you'll join me with this instructional video, and I thank you for joining me. So one of the first things you want to understand when you're starting a new worm bin is that the worms are going to break this stuff down, and it's going to get a lot smaller than what it is now. Because once the worms break it down into worm castings, it's going to get about half of this. So in my other video that I did, this bin was completely full of worm castings when I started. So what happened was the worms came up into this bin and broke them down, and it made it down to about half the worm bin. So this is actually worm castings underneath this right here. This is worm castings. I could have harvested these. So the bin wouldn't get very heavy that way because it was full. It wasn't very heavy because most of it was just carbon and food. So another very important thing you want to worry about but another very important detail you want to remember is when you're filling these worm bins up, they will not be full when you harvest them. They will be broken down and they will go down and the bin will get lower and lower. So if you only filled this bin half full, you're only going to have probably 1/8 to 1/4 of a bin full at harvest time. So if you're interested in keeping your bin light at harvest time, you want to only fill it up one time, let the worms break it down, and then harvest that. So it doesn't matter if it's in one of these bins, tower bins, or if it's just in a regular tote or anything like that. It doesn't really matter. It's really comes down to how much you put in there to start with and balancing your carbon and your carbon and your food ratio when you first start. Another important thing when you're looking after these worm bins is managing your moisture ratio. So that's also very important as well. The more moisture that you have into this bin, the more that it's going to weigh at the time of harvest. So if you can keep your worm castings drier through the process of the worms turning them into castings, it'll actually create a lighter bin at harvest time. So that's important to remember, that you're keeping the bin lighter with less moisture. The worms don't need a lot of moisture. They need a little moisture to survive because that's how they breathe through their skin. But they don't need that much that you have to have a really wet worm bin that's really too wet, and it's going to be even heavier when you try to harvest. So you want to make sure you keep the bin as least moist as you possibly can if you want a lighter bin. So the next way to keep your bin lighter is by screening out the worm castings as the worms create them. So you don't have to do, like what I do is I will fill the bin up and I'll fill the bin up again and I'll fill the bin up again and keep letting the worms break it down. Then I'll harvest the worm castings all at one time. So you don't have to do that. You can actually take this worm bin, and when you're ready to harvest, you can take, like this bin is half full of worm castings right now. So if you look at these worm castings here, I could have taken these out. If you've got worm castings that are mixed in stuff, you can take these out and screen the worm castings out as you harvest and as the worms break them down. And that way, every few days you're taking out a few handfuls and you're screening out the worm castings into their own separate bin, and you're using those worm castings in your garden. That's very useful if you don't want to harvest a big heavy bin at the end of the time when the worm castings are ready to harvest. You can take every couple of weeks, or my bin, it broke down a whole bin within a month. So I mean, every week or every 2 weeks, you could go in and you could take the worm castings out with a screen and screen the worm castings out. And then you're going to have worm castings. You're going to have a lighter bin, and you're going to have worm castings every couple of weeks. So that really works out to maintain the weight of your worm bin. So one of the biggest things that comes down to the weight of these worms bin is actually your carbon. So when you're putting carbon in your worm bin and you want your bin to be lighter, it's a good idea to limit the amount of carbon that you're putting in. If you're putting a lot of carbon in, the bin is going to weigh more. You want to keep the food and such into the bin. You want to keep that kind of stuff. You want more food, not too much. You want to have a good balance, but if you want to put less food and less carbon in if you're trying to maintain the weight of your bins so they're not too heavy at harvest time. So now we're going to look at the bin that's underneath the bin we just looked at. So this bin here, okay, so this is my working bin right now. So this is the bin that I've been filling up every week, every couple of weeks, and I've been putting food and more carbon in, and I've been layering it in there. So now we're going to talk about how to keep your bin heavier and harvest more castings if you want to. So it's almost exactly the opposite. If you look at this bin, and it's the exact opposite thing that you're trying to do. If you're trying to keep your bin light, you want to do the exact opposite. You want to keep adding more carbon, and you want to keep adding more food to this bin every couple of weeks. So if you see on top here, this is all, like these worms are all in here on top. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing these worms in. So these worms are getting drawn into the bin. So these castings here, these are ready to go castings. If you look at these castings, these are ready to harvest. So if I want to keep this bin light, I could filter these out right now and take a screen and screen all these castings out and just leave all this food. I don't work that way. Doesn't mean you don't have to do it that way, or you can do it that way if you want to. But what I do is I like to keep layering more carbon and more food in here on top of the bin. And what this is doing is this is actually creating a heavier bin. So this is going to be a much heavier bin than if I only filled it one time and left it until the end. If you want to harvest more worm castings, you want to keep layering food and carbon in here on top of the castings that are already done. And that way, the worms are coming up, breaking this stuff down, and it's going to keep settling down into your bin, and you're going to keep adding more and more weight to the bin, and you're going to add more and more carbon, more and more castings at harvest. So we've got some cabbage and stuff in here. So the worms are all up in here working really hard. You can see them in here. They're all breaking this stuff down. There's actually a little less in here just because I've been taking a lot of them out. I've been baiting them up top here, and I've started a couple other bins. I've wanted to start a few more bins and have some more, even more worm castings. So you can see they're in here all breaking this stuff down. Whole cabbage is actually starting to root again. The worms are in here. They're breaking this stuff down. So this bin, as I keep doing it, I'm going to move this bin down. And then what I'll do is this bin will become my working bin over here. This bin that I showed you earlier. This one will move down. I won't put anything else in this bin. I'll just leave this bin, and it will keep breaking down. And it'll probably be about 3/4 to probably probably 3/4 full when I'm ready to harvest it. And that'll give these worms time to break this stuff down, and I'll start adding more food and more carbon to this bin. So this bin will work better as the working bin. And then the bottom bin, my very bottom bin that's already ready to harvest, it's about 3/4 full. I'll take that one, I'll empty all the worm castings out, and I'll move that one up to the top. And then I'll restart the whole process all over again. So this one will be my second bin down, and then the bottom bin will be my new top bin up here that will be filled, and that will be the one that I'll let the worms move up into. And then I'll keep working this bin that's down, the second one, down. So I hope that video helped you guys to understand how to maintain the weight of your worm bin, and I hope it helped you to understand if you want to have more worm castings or less worm castings in your bin. If it did, I hope that you'll subscribe and like the video. And I appreciate everybody that watches my videos and subscribes, and all the people that are making comments, and all the other channels that have been really nice to me and come to my channel and said really nice things about my channel. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys all have a great day, and happy worm farming.